Welcome to the Entrepreneurial CEO podcast, where we dive into the real stories behind building and scaling a business. Each episode, we sit down with CEOs, founders, and leaders to uncover hard-won lessons in leadership, systems, and team building. Listen in each week to learn directly from real business leaders who have been in your shoes, had success, made the mistakes, and all of the messiness that comes with building a business. If you're ready to learn from real-world leaders and gain insights you can apply today, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Miranda, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, folks. Today's guest is Miranda Barrett, founder and CEO of Mind the Mic Consulting. They're a firm dedicated to helping leaders and organizations master the art of public speaking and communication. Miranda's career is pretty fascinating. Stints in the White House, from coordinating high-stakes events with the White House, and then leading expansion efforts for EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is near and dear to Mike's heart. And she helped double its size worldwide. She's worked with tons of top executives, entrepreneurs, business leaders, organizations, helping them sharpen their messaging and elevating their leadership presence, which is super important, and driving impact. So today she joins us, and I'm super excited. We're going to talk about the power of influence. We're going to talk about mistakes people make in communication. There's lots of those, and how they can improve their ability to inspire action, whether they're on stage or leading their teams internally. So Miranda, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And we're excited to talk to you. So let's dive in.
Thank you so much. Jump in.
All right. So before we get into the questions, tell us about Mind the Mic. Tell us what you do there and who you're helping.
Absolutely. So Mind the Mic came to me given the 10, 15 plus years I've spent working in events. And most often in big events, you picture like a giant general session room. Everyone's looking forwards at the stage. I was usually the person way in the back of the room, standing by the door, because my job would be to very quietly open and close the door for people that were tiptoeing back out because the speaker wasn't landing it, right? Like they weren't delivering the value the audience was looking for. And as someone who's really motivated by trust, that would always just like gut me, right? Because people had paid money to be there. They were away from their families, away from their businesses. And here I am kind of quietly opening and closing the door so they can get out and like go play on their phones and do email, which they could just as well be doing at home. So we say that we are on a mission. No more bad breakout speakers at events ever. No more sessions where you come out being like, well, that was an hour of my life I'll never get back. So we love working with leaders, particularly entrepreneurs who have the most incredible stories to tell, to look at what does it take to get you booked for more stages. You know, we find that entrepreneurs love being the person who is up on stage sharing their story, but all the work that goes into getting booked, having good marketing material, having a presentation that's going to land and is engaging with these short attention spans. And then what is the business ROI on all of that public speaking? Are you capturing leads at the end of your talk? Are you following up? So we partner with entrepreneurs on the holistically on the speaking ecosystem to make sure that, you know, one, you've got a fantastic talk, two, you're putting yourself out there, and three, you're capturing business ROI on your talks.
So Miranda, I know we've chatted a little bit about this. By the way, Andrew, I think when she used to be in the back of the room for my speeches, that's when she was most busy closing and opening the doors. But Miranda, so you stop when they hit the stage, so to speak, because you're not a speaking coach. You do everything to get them ready to be on stage and be amazing, and then everything that happens afterwards in order to them to maximize their ROI. Is that an interesting? Is that the right way to play it back to you?
Yeah, absolutely. We say that we are everything before and after the stage. There is a wealth of fantastic speaking coaches out there. We love to refer people over to them, but we are in the business of speaking. You know, we are your backstage partner.
Okay, so you know, those that listen to this podcast or ever see me speak, you know, I love talking about strategy, and there's like, you know, depending on what the company, there's 4 or 5 questions you always have to ask. And one of them is like, what's the niche? And another one is the value you're going to provide. And what I love about what you're doing, Miranda, is that you're very specific on that niche that you're in. Like, it's like, this is exactly what we do. This is who we do it for. I have never heard of this industry, Andrew. Like this whole concept of getting people on. This is phenomenal because I know we do it and we have a playbook we run, but like most companies, most people that speak, they don't get this.
Well, I'll tell you, and I just want to add, I think it's awesome because there's such a huge difference when you go. I've gone to a ton of events, right? And some people that present, you're just like, oh my God, that was amazing. We just went to one recently. There was a guy on stage at Trainual. His presentation was so good for 45 minutes. People were laughing. The content was amazing. And then you have others where you're like, oh my God, dude, please wrap it up. It's just such a stark difference. So I think it's amazing that I haven't heard of this before, and I think it's
But I mean,
much
the
needed.
concept that's killer for me, Andrew, is like so many speakers, they don't do the prep in the beginning and they don't do the prep after. So, for example, we're going to speak at a conference. In fact, I don't even think we're speaking at this conference next week. But like you have driven this, the front end of the playbook, which is let's set meetings. And then Chad's on the back end at the event, having the meetings and then doing the follow up and the nurturing. And like we learn that from somebody else, but I rarely see it optimized. And so the fact that that's what you do, Miranda, like we have to figure out how you get connected. Like I think of like publishers, there's so many people, there's so many people that speak on stage that could use this. It's a great
Yeah.
business. Congrats.
Thank you. Well, I think conferences are such an incredible opportunity for connection and for learning, right? And it's the responsibility of the event organizers and the speakers to make sure that they make that happen. But, for you as a speaker, if you're attending a conference, what are you doing before and after to be memorable and visible to attendees? Are you posting on social media and tagging? Are you downloading the conference app and posting about your session? And if you're in a breakout, you're competing in a crowded field. People have a choice what session they go to, and you shouldn't be leaving it to luck or whatever random session title you've put on your talk that day. You can be proactively connecting with people, filling your room, making it easy for them to connect with you. And then the biggest mistake I see speakers make, and this kills me, is they bring their suitcase, it's right off stage, and then the minute they finish talking, they're out of there, right? You have
Yeah.
just missed out on the biggest opportunity to connect and close business if that's your goal, because everyone in that room sees you as this incredible thought leader, and you've just shown them that your time is more important, and you're gonna book it out of there.
Mm. That's a
I
good
think
point.
next time
That's a
we
very
do
good
one of
point.
these, Andrew, we should just host an after hour cocktail party.
There
That
you
we get a
go.
lot of people there. We can talk to everybody. Be perfect.
It always does.
Tell me
Everybody's
when
ready
to
for
show
a
up.
drink after.
I'm there.
Ugh, I love it.
I want to go back now that we understand Mind the Mic. I want to go back and talk about the early in your career, which I think is fascinating to me. Coordinating White House trips for the president. Like, tell us about that. That sounds super interesting. How'd you get there, and what was it like? Working under that high pressure environment. I imagine you learned a lot through that experience.
I mean, that was literally my first job while I was in college. And I didn't appreciate, I was so young, I didn't appreciate what an extraordinary situation I was in, or maybe how stressed I should have been by it, because I just didn't know better. I started interning at the White House my freshman year in the correspondence department. And then by just sheer luck, I got transferred to the travel office. And one day I came into work and they said, we need someone to go to Germany right now. Someone had appendicitis. And I said, where's the airport? I'd never left the country before. I had never been on an international flight. I had never used my passport, and just said yes and went and did a really great job. So my role was to help set up for presidential trips. It's called Advance, where you handle all the details that go into the press corps, the hotels, the buses, the security, kind of all a huge team of people go out in advance of presidential trips. And I really just discovered my love of planning and details and coordination and being a part of this huge team that came together from all over the world to support these presidential visits.
In order to take away from that, which I love, you just raised your hand and said, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out. And you just took a risk, right? Like, I had the same experience when I was young. There was somebody that came in, I was interning, and he's like, who wants to learn blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'll do it. And that ended up like turning into a larger career in that industry. It was just, you just never know. You just have to say yes to stuff and take a risk and go for it.
I mean, you really never know like what's going to be like the stick you plant in the road that ends up sending you down a direction that, if I hadn't said yes to that, I probably wouldn't have met my husband. I wouldn't have been on this career that I'm on now. I mean, those moments and the things that kind of come after it just create this whole amazing path for us.
You have to take the risks. You have to. That's awesome.
I'm giggling over here, Miranda, because like I'll never forget, and I think you may have been part of the group that did this, but when I was the chairman of the organization for EO, and I had to take my first trip, and I was well known as not having been very well traveled. And what they did before I took my first trip somewhere, I don't know where I was going to speak. maybe it was you, Miranda. Somebody handed me a book called Behave Yourself, and it gave me all the cultural norms, funny stories for each country so that I was on my game and didn't embarrass myself or, more importantly, the organization. So thank you, Miranda.
You don't know what you don't know. And what I really loved about my role was helping prepare people to be phenomenal on stage. And, I used to think that was a weakness, that I just loved being in this kind of support role. People told me that it was very unexecutive of me not to be the one on stage. But with this business, I've just decided to lean into it. One of our core values is radical support, because that's what we like. We love being the people in the back of the room. Caito, I mean, how many times did I run slides for you, and we would rehearse and make sure it was right and you were comfortable, and that's okay.
No, no, I I would never have been successful on stage without Miranda, and some of the times she would say to me, "That's not going to work, what you're about to say," or "You need to change that," or I'm sure she even gave me a couple of, "Are you wearing that?" So, you
Surely
What do you
know,
mean,
not.
like a cutoff shirt and a backwards hat or something? Or what were you wearing?
well, it's a couple of times I just tried to wear a mesh shirt, and she said that's not appropriate for the audience.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that's about
Uh,
me.
you mentioned EO, so let's talk about that. So when you were there, I think you helped us to double the size globally. Um, with scaling and growth of that magnitude, what kind of challenges or did you encounter? Like, how did you keep people aligned and ensure execution when you're going that fast?
Yeah, it was a strange role to be in, to be, charged with a goal, a growth goal, but to have very little control over it, because each
Mm,
EO chapter has its own autonomy over how many new members they bring on. I realized right away I was sitting on a database of 1,000 people who wanted to join the organization and had even put their credit card number in the application, but I couldn't just go in and start hitting submit, right?
mm,
So the influence side of it was one, like really pitching the message of why growth was good for the organization down to a local level, to the chapters, some of whom were very resistant and felt that adding new members would completely blow up their member experience, or somebody didn't want to do the work, or whatever that blocker was. So the first thing was a lot of one-on-one calls with 100 and something different membership tiers in each chapter. But the other big opportunity that I got to be a part of was launching new chapters around the world and putting a team together to go into brand new markets and find these incredible leaders who were just waiting for a group like EO to show up, and set up the infrastructure there so that EO's global footprint could continue to grow. And I got to be a part of probably about 25 different new city locations that are now thriving around the world.
that's awesome.
Which
I'm
which
curious. I'd love to learn a little bit. Or maybe you talked about uh, the power of or needing to influence when you can't control, right? And I think people run into that a lot, especially in larger organizations. What kind of tips or strategies might you be able to share around that, right? Like, how did you, especially dealing with it globally, right? You can't just like knock on somebody's office. So how'd you deal with that?
For sure. And I think I would add to that too, the cultural element. We were dealing with 30 something different countries as well, that all had a different perception of letting unknowns into the group, places where you didn't join the chapter unless, that everyone knew your family going back 2 generations. And I quickly learned that that was something that I had to respect. Like, what were the things what were the things that I could change, and what were the things that it would be very detrimental to try to change, or to be judgmental about. So for me, it really started with one-on-one calls. This was before the days of Zoom. I'll date myself. So it was a lot of phone calls. I think maybe Skype was just kind of starting to show up on the scene,
Mhm.
and just kind of having those calls, talking to them about what resources were available, and then really starting the conversation about, what could it look like if you added X new members to the chapter, and here's all the ways we could do that. Here's all the ways we're going to make sure they're great people, the right fit. And, I really could never be the one to actually pull the trigger, but I could do things like create competitions,
Mm,
get testimonials from people who were doing a great job, shine visibility into who was bringing on new members and who wasn't, provide leaders with a lot of data. Like, here's 5 years of data showing your chapter is shrinking, and at this rate will be dead
mm,
in 2 years. Things like that, where I could combine both influence and facts, generally would get some traction.
mm. Mike, did you have a question? I thought.
Yeah, I was going to ask her what, like, some of the more interesting chapters you had to start around the world, and then I was going to comment. What were some of those, Miranda?
Well, I mean,
So
I
I know
will
we had,
say for every chapter that I was part of a successful launch, there was probably one that didn't take off, and it was could be such a crapshoot, particularly if we were starting off with a leader who wasn't the right fit, but we really wanted to be in that location. We knew that was a place there'd be a chapter. We were all getting pressure from different directions that we should be in this location, and I'd always have this feeling in my gut where it's like, oh, this is not the right person. And
yeah.
then yeah, and those, if we were lucky, we'd end up finding someone who was. But to your question, I was involved Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nigeria, Tanzania, a whole bunch in the US that are less fun
Wow.
to say out loud. Yeah, the task team that worked on China, Africa, and South, all the Brazils,
Wow.
Peru, Ecuador. Yeah, some fun spots.
That's really cool.
I mean, it's so funny because it does come down to the right leader. And when we would start new chapters, and I say we as an organization, it was very important that we found a leader that understood the power of being around other people that wanted to do what they wanted to do, meaning it was a peer group of entrepreneurs. It's amazing how many times you come across entrepreneurs that are doing well and they're just like, no, I'm good. I don't need that. And, we all know that, what's the saying? You are the average of your five closest friends, or you are who you hang out with. Of course, I try to tell my kids this. And it's hard. Sometimes people don't get that until once you experience it, then you're like, okay, I get it now. But the entrepreneurs that really I felt and still feel that get the most out of an EO or a YPO chapter are the ones that raise their hand to lead, to step up, because you're talking about influence, and it's hard to get training to lead, when you don't have authority. All right. And so that forces you to become great at influence for the right reasons, to find common ground on certain items, to be able to communicate and lead through those things. And that's, to me, was the biggest benefit that came from leading within EO and YPO. And I think even as Miranda was part of the team, that supported the growth and the membership. But as a team member, Miranda, you got plenty of experience of leading without authority.
I think leading without authority was basically a requirement of working there. On my first day, the book on my desk was the persuasion, like the psychology
Mm,
of persuasion, how to
Yeah.
lead without authority,
Yeah.
because that was an important part. Understandably, as a nonprofit volunteer led organization, that was really how everything got done. And I mean,
Yep.
to your point, I quickly realized, especially in new locations, you're going in asking busy entrepreneurs to pay money for something that they are going to have to do the work on themselves. That was a tough sell, particularly
Mhm.
in certain cultures where the whole concept of volunteerism is very different than here in the U.S. You've
Exactly.
experienced that,
It's like they volunteer, but
yeah.
they have a staff to do it. Yeah, I get it.
100%. Yeah. And so we would organize these road shows of taking groups of EO members into these locations to, be at the events and really, really demonstrate like this is the caliber of incredible people that you'll be spending time with.
It's awesome. Thank you.
I mean, you guys are talking about business leaders all over the world. You've both worked with a ton. I'm curious, right? Like, you've worked with, I'm sure, some leaders who are amazing, and then some who are, I'm sure some were average, maybe even some were bad, or room for improvement. But I'm curious,
Mhm.
like, with some leaders, they inspire people, they know how to really lead an organization, where others are more managerial. They're just managing, right? And not really inspiring their people and not motivating their people. What kind of differences do you see between those? And I guess my second question is, do you think that's something that's just like inside or can be taught and learned?
Oh, that's a great question. One of my favorite quotes is if you think you're leading and you turn around and no one is following, you're just out for a walk. And I worked with a lot of leaders who were just out for walks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Caito just busted out laughing there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and and I think the difference really for me was who did a good job of explaining, the why and the purpose of what we're doing, and who immediately jumped into the how and what. Like, here's what you're going to do, and give me a
Yeah.
to-do list, right? You don't need to do that. I'm a motivated person. Like, I want to be able. I'll probably be able to figure out how to do it faster, better, cheaper than you are, and that's okay. But if you talk to me about the why and what your vision is, and what does it done look like, where is this ship going, then I'm the kind of person who love, like, great, I will make you spreadsheets and schedules and budgets all day long and have so much joy from doing it. But if you get in my business in those spreadsheets and start leaving little comments and everything else, then, like, great, you want to own it, it's all yours.
Yeah.
And that's when execution would really fall off.
Mike, what do you
And
think?
Miranda was that was, Miranda, that's the best answer, because when I had to speak and Miranda would help me with my speeches and how we're going to present, we always led with purpose. I don't know if I ever spoke in any country where the first line I said, EO is an organization, and then I go into the purpose about who we were, our mission, and what we were all about. And everything started there. And I think that's the immediate connection point. So, that's a great answer.
I just want to add one thing. I think that I agree with you with communicating the why and the vision. I also think some of the leaders I've worked with in the past who maybe didn't rise to that level, they, for some reason, forgot the human connection. And I think that it's harder when you have maybe a team of 5,000 or 10,000, these huge organizations. But when your company is still small, you have to make a connection with your people. And it has to be authentic, that you care, right? That you they're part of your team for a reason. Why are they going to follow you? Why are they going to bust their butt for you? Because you've connected with them and shown them that you're going to lead them, and you care about them as an individual as well as professionally. Yeah. I think that's super important. And a lot of people miss that.
They do. I think, Miranda, we used to call that, or at least like once in a while I get asked to speak to some like incoming leaders of EO. And, I tell them there's three things I tell them. Well, I tell them like 5 or 6, but 3 that come to mind right now is street credibility means something, meaning like you can try to lead, but if you haven't done some of the things that you're asking other people to do, that becomes very difficult to lead people when you haven't done some of the things. So other things I tell them, I go, leaders, and this applies to business, leaders need to know when to lead, but leaders need to know when to follow. And so if you're building an organization for profit, for example, you empower an executive team to do things. And if you're going to try to step and get in their things, like Miranda just said, it's not going to work. So you need to be able to cross that bridge. You need to be able to say, hey, this is when I lead, this is when I follow. And the third thing I always tell them, and Miranda, I think you can appreciate that. I always say in EO, it's like, when you're in a leadership position, you have power, but the minute you use that power, you lose it. Meaning you have authority and you have power as a leader. But if you're trying to lead them the wrong way by using power, like you just said, Miranda, they're gone. They're not following you anymore.
Yeah,
you got to do what you guys just said.
Yeah, I've always been kind of blown away. The concept of learned helplessness is so interesting to me. And it's something that I've observed in myself at PTA gatherings at my kids' school, right? Where if, I'm very much like a take charge, event planning, run an event kind of thing. And then I'm in a situation where someone who's even more of a driver than me, is telling everyone what to do. I'm like, I'm just going to stand in the back here. And unless some kid starts bleeding, I'm not really doing anything because I'm waiting for someone to tell me what to do, because I haven't been given like a clear role or a path or a goal. And I'm just going to stand back here in the corner playing on TikTok or whatever, waiting for someone to tell me what to do. And you can really observe it in yourself, like in different kind of environments, based on how someone is managing, your presence there, how you just sort of automatically react.
That's a great learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness. It's so interesting.
It is interesting.
That's cool.
Well, one of the connections I think between Mind the Mic and MAP is communication, right? And obviously we talk about that a lot, the importance of communication and proper communication through the workshop and as part of the 6 functions of management. And obviously communication and speaking is a big part of what Mind the Mic. You help people with, like, when CEOs or executives or leaders are out there, whether it's internal or public speaking at events, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see when they're trying to present and communicate?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the most common mistake I see pretty much every speaker making right now is trying to cram too much content into their talk. And that is going to backfire on them because with the way attention spans are so short these days, right? Mike's probably been checking his email since we started this recording. So with the short attention spans, if you're going to cram too much into your speech, not only does it stress out your audience, it can actually like make the science of the brain is so interesting. It'll cause stress. It could even make them angry. And your brain starts crying for a break because too much information is coming at it. And when that happens, the easiest thing to do is pull out the phone and just check out. And exactly, it's totally like the equivalent of a pacifier. And so, speakers, I think sometimes feel pressure that like, okay, I've been brought in to speak for 45 minutes on this topic. I have to cram in the 17 different points that I know to be able to really give them their value. And no, like the good news is you don't have to do that. Like give them 3 and do a really good job with 3. And, when were you ever angry at a speaker because he or she wrapped up their talk 3 minutes early, right?
Yeah.
Like answer never. So I think, one of the most important things that leaders could look at is what is the number one takeaway I want the audience to get? What is one thing I want them to do differently as a result of seeing me speak? And build your whole talk to that, as opposed to coming in with like, here's my 10-point bullet plan. We're going to cram all this in. I'm going to go so fast that all you do is just irritate your audience.
I couldn't agree. Yeah. I think in my experience with giving presentations, sometimes you feel like you need to give more value. And so you're trying to cram stuff in, but you're right. It's like, it's too much. You need to dial it back, maybe go deeper on a particular topic, give some breathing room, slow down. It's tough. Yeah.
Well, leave them wanting more. And then particularly if you're speaking for business visibility, give them a way to get more from you later. Like here's, download, I've shared with you 3 of my 10 points. Here's a link to download them all. Connect with me after the conference because I don't have my suitcase. I'm not running out the door as soon as I'm done talking.
That's a good idea.
It's better. Yeah, exactly. It's better for your takeaway. It is like, we've only had 45 minutes. There's a lot more I can share. I'd love to talk with you about it afterwards.
I like that. That's really good.
Yeah, I like that too.
To add that to your presentations, Mike.
Yeah, I'm probably like culprit of all that.
Well, yours go long. Mike's got workshops that go 4 hours. It's a lot of content.
Are they scheduled for 4 hours? Or they scheduled him for like 30 minutes and he just takes 4 hours?
They're scheduled, but like you're right. I think of the last one I did, and okay, it got great ratings, and after I looked at the ratings, I was like, these ratings are representative of how it was, in my opinion. I looked back and I was like, there's so many things I could have did differently. Like, and number one is that right there, Miranda. I put too much in there, and like people probably walked out of there like, where do I start? And that sucks.
Well, I think you're being overly critical. I think that the workshop you gave was intentionally longer, right? It wasn't just like a 45-minute presentation on a topic. It was like you were going deep on things. It was supposed to be hands-on. So it's a little bit different, but maybe it could be shortened up, right? I don't know. And I think that people did get a lot of value out of it. I think you're a perfectionist, Mike. You're always tweaking. I was
going to say that's a great segue to sort of imposter syndrome and leaders who think they aren't doing a good enough job from on stage. I imagine, Mike, with those ratings, nobody was leaving you great ratings, just to be nice necessarily. Like you're possibly being hard on yourself. And I see a lot of leaders do that because they don't think they have something, worthy of sharing or teaching or so on, and holding themselves back. When the truth is, audiences clearly got a lot of value from your talk, and the same, we say the same thing to other leaders who feel nervous about taking the stage.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. That's why people show up, right? They're there to learn from you, and sometimes people forget. It's natural. You're on stage. You're in front of, I don't know, hundreds of people, thousands, however many people. It's natural to be nervous, but that's a really good point.
Yeah. And then, to that point, then the other stupid thing I see a lot of speakers do is starting their talk with the long introduction of their credentials. And that right? It breaks my little heart when someone's like, oh, and I have a PhD and I have it. I'm like, dude, you're already on stage. Clearly somebody thought you were worth being up there. I don't need your CV. Tell me a fun story. Hold my attention. Just freaking dive right in. Yeah. I mean, the name of all that is holy. Do not have like your business headshot and then 5 bullet points about your background and your career, because I have checked out already. You've lost me.
For sure. I think people sometimes, I don't know your experience. Forget it can be fun. It can have humor, like the best presentations I've seen have been funny. They're just like
Yeah.
being themselves instead of being so stiff. Like you're saying, like, I don't need your LinkedIn profile, dude. It's okay. You're there. Just talk, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what you're, I think this whole part of this like podcast here, it's these are really great tips for people that are listening right now. I mean, like the fact that, what you just said, Miranda, is so common. I see that so much, or the introduction. Like, I hate the introduction on stage. Like, well, this is Mike Caito, and he's da da da. And I'm like, just give me the mic. They'll learn about me as we go. But being funny, telling great stories, being authentic, just being you, making mistakes, and sometimes being like, sometimes admitting a mistake. Like I've been on stage before and I told a joke that wasn't funny. And I was like, well, that was supposed to be funny. I mean, just things that get the audience. Like one tip that I love is how do I get interaction
Yeah.
immediately? Miranda, have you seen like good ways for like a lot of speakers and people that are listening, they get nervous before they go on stage, and you can read all the books about deep breathing and all the other stuff you can do. But what are some of the things you've seen that help a speaker get comfortable once they hit the stage?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll share one of my favorite books on speaking is called Talk Like Ted by Carmine Gallo. And he talks about how to be a great speaker, you have to be emotional, novel, and memorable. And I think of those, my favorite is novel because it's the opportunity to surprise the audience, like to do something unexpected. And that could be like, there's an amazing TED talk where a doctor was talking about her own having a stroke and observing a stroke. And she brings out human brain, like a whole big floppy, squishy human brain to talk about her topic. That's novel. Bill Gates in his TED talk releasing a jar of mosquitoes and saying, poor people shouldn't be the only ones who are exposed to malaria. And the people in the front row, like, jumping out. So, I think it's a little bit lazy on the part of speakers to think that a talk is just, you getting up on stage and talking for 45 minutes. There can be interactive elements. I have a giant sand timer over here that I bring out to talk about, the importance of the audience's time that I turn over and say, okay, I've got an hour to be worthy of your time. Here we go. So whatever it is, you can props, handouts, something tactile for people to play with. One of my friends starts their presentations with a card trick, but he deliberately gets it wrong. They go through the whole thing and then, is this your card? No. And it's just hysterical and it's memorable and people remember him as the bad magic guy. So I think, if it doesn't detract from your content, even if it's serious business content, to be engaging and to be fun and to tell stories, videos, interactive polling tools. I mean, with technology now, there's so much we can do. So really, I'd say the number one tip is just don't stand up and just speak.
So you said emotional, novel, and
memorable.
I like that a lot. Yeah. The concept of using, it's almost like using props, right? But you're being intentional about going beyond just the presentation. Nobody's there for your amazing PowerPoint slides, right? It's making it engaging. I like that a lot.
Don't even get me warmed up on what I'm, the horribleness, sins committed with PowerPoint slides.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's try. Okay, should you have a PowerPoint slide? Like, is it okay to get up there with no slides and just have fun with the audience? Or do you think there should be something?
I think it's important to remember that people learn in different ways. And your slides should enhance what you are teaching as a speaker. They shouldn't carry the weight of it themselves. And not everyone is experienced enough as a speaker to pull that off. I mean, me personally, the idea that terrifies me. But you can be using your presentation, full-size photos, for example. You're telling a story, full-size picture behind you of the story, like bonus points if it's a personal family photo that you took yourself. You can use, one of my favorite tricks is to make the slide, just put a black square on a slide. So the slide goes dark and then audience attention is fully on you. Click to the next slide, comes back up. You can progress in information slowly. There's all kinds of things you can do so that your deck is supporting you, but not taking attention away from you. But never, in the name of all that is holy, the idea now that we have these slides that are just full of text and the audience isn't reading, they're not listening to you. So I really, if I could kill off one thing, it would be more than 10 words per slide.
Wow.
I like that. Yeah, I totally agree. If you're just reading off the slide, you're not, I don't need you there on stage. I can read it myself.
Exactly. Like just
Yeah.
email me the
Oh,
slide deck. Yeah. To not look at.
that's Andrew. That's Andrew. He's a high C. He's
I mean,
like, I don't need
come
to
on.
talk to you. Just show me what I need to read.
Email me the deck. I didn't have to be here, right? But you're right.
Yeah.
I like the idea the deck should be a reference point. It should be supporting whatever you're delivering on stage. Photos, I don't know, data points, something. Making it more engaging.
Yeah. I mean, I think a good deck is one where if you were to email the deck to me after the talk, it would make no sense at all, right? Like, because it's nothing but photos and like one words. So I think the other thing I see speakers get wrong is, the number one question, are you going to email me the slides? Never email your slides after. Like have a 2 or 3 page version that has a recap that PS can also include a plug about you and your business at the bottom, because why not? Or here's the other topics I speak on, or here's the QR code to find whatever it is. But, sending someone slides, when have you ever looked at slides that someone sent you again? Never. And also you don't, because they're not helpful. Like why would you want a 60 slide deck that hopefully won't make a lot of sense? Send a recap.
So I got a question about that.
ChatGPT and give me a summary or something. But yeah, nobody's going through the slides again.
I mean, I think I have never heard that idea before. That is so good. A 2 or 3 page recap with a few other things.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. You tell me if I'm crazy, but I had to do something. I think I have a presentation coming up and like I have to have a deck for it. And then they were like, I said, I'm not emailing, the deck's not available after the presentation, because I wanted to be like Scarcity. You show up. If you care, you show up.
Yep.
And I'm not emailing it out afterwards. It's like you got to be on the call. We're not sending out a video of it. It's live. It's hot. Like that's it. Is that wrong? Bad? Could that be good to create scarcity and build audience anticipation?
Was that an in-person event or virtual? Or
It was going to be a virtual.
Were they recording you anyway, though?
I was doing a virtual event. It would be a webinar. Okay. It's recorded. And I was like, I'm not sending out, you can record it, but I'm not sending it out afterwards to everybody. So if you want to attend, if you want to see, you got to attend. Is that trying too hard to create scarcity? Or do you think, like, would you ever send the video? Would you send the video out? What would you do in that situation? Am I wrong to think like that? Because I'm starting to think like I can say I'm not going to send the video, but I'm going to send that 3-page recap.
Yeah, I mean, it depends a little bit on like the context of the event. I'm working on a big conference right now where everyone's slide decks will be available in the app afterwards. So it sort of depends on, are you making a lot of noise over something that's not actually going to help you achieve your goals or not? So I would tie it back to like, okay, your goal, let's say the goal is to actually get people there in the room. Let's drive to that. And what can we do to fill that? Versus sort of, I feel like at that point, it's you already, the horse is out of the barn as far as people not being there and then not getting a deck. So maybe I hear you on the scarcity. There's other things I would do to drive people there and create urgency and those kind of things. There's going to be, you're going to give something away at the end of the talk to 3 people, or there's a drawing from people who are actually there, something like that. Or here's all the amazing takeaways. So I think it's a carrot and a stick. You don't need to be all stick. Throw a little more carrot in there.
All right. I was just curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's I think that was for the webinar, right, Mike?
Probably. Yeah. That's just that could be me.
It's just very saying. Common these days for people to sign up for stuff like that and just not come. For sure. A lot of people.
Yeah.
We had that. Yeah. Totally. I'm with you. I got you.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about, you've had a lot of leadership positions. Looking back over your career, like what's a leadership lesson you've had to learn the hard way?
That is such a tough question, because there's been a lot. I mean, I've been lucky that so far there hasn't been some, huge calamitous kind of event. For me, just looking back, it's the times I had to fire people that really sit in my stomach, because I always question, like, was there more that I as a leader could have, should have done? Did I do enough of a job communicating expectations in advance? Did I set them up for success? Did I hire the wrong person? All those kind of things. I probably had to fire about 6 people. I could tell you every single one of their names, all the ways that I feel like it was my fault that it came to that. So I think that's kind of tough. And it was tough for me just launching my own business. How quickly did I want to scale and add staff? Because I still feel kind of people shy when it comes to that management side of it, because nothing really, I think, exposes your flaws as a leader than suddenly having to take a team through a startup and kind of all the ups and downs. And now we're going this way and now we're going that way. Now we're reacting to this market. And so that's something that's really always made me nervous.
That's funny. That's a good transition because this podcast is called the Entrepreneurial CEO. It's about people like all of us that have gone from making the decision that we wanted to be an, well, I don't even know if you can make that decision, to be honest with you. It's like, I think sometimes you just have it in you, like you're born and it's like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. But at some point, as you start to scale the business, as you said, we start to maybe even get the imposter syndrome where we know we've got to layer in the things that CEOs are great at, especially the discipline around certain things in your business, like planning and staffing. And accountability. And those are not hard. And so the goal here is to try to help bridge those gaps to like go as we're slowly taking baby steps, we're adding in the most important elements of that CEO that is required to really scale the business. So what you're feeling is totally normal and natural. In fact, I suck at it. The people part, I'm not great.
Everybody hates firing people. It's the worst.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Because
you don't hire people that you hate. You hire people that you enjoy working with, hopefully, and that are qualified, competent people. And so having to let them go, especially if it's a decision that you made, it's painful. It hurts.
I mean, my dad was our bookkeeper up until last year. Had to let him go.
Okay.
That hurts. That hurts a lot. It's an awkward family get together right there.
Actually, I think he fired me. So,
listen. It's like if you're sitting in team meetings and they're fun, that's great. If you're sitting in team meetings and they're fun and there's a tremendous amount of accountability, personal accountability, that's even better. And if you're sitting in one that's not only fun, but has a lot of accountability, but you're having the conversations about the brutal facts of the business, that's the best. And I've been in meetings that didn't have all those things in it. And I feel like you have to be able to have all three of those to have a really productive team and feel like I'm enjoying going to work every day, because it sucks going to work when those things aren't in place. And sometimes we have to be super, super intentional as entrepreneurs to drive the company in that direction. And all of us can make a meeting fun, no problem. Okay. But it's more difficult to say, let's have those tough conversations about really what's going on. And then let's talk about who's accountable and what's going to get done. That's the transition of entrepreneur to entrepreneurial CEO. So if we can do that, which I feel like I think people can, they might need help in coaching. That's going to be the big difference in building a business that's small or building a business that's the size you want it to be.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a big lesson I learned early on in this adventure. I wrote it down on a Post-it. It said, no one is coming to save you. Right. And so if meetings were not productive, no one is coming to save me. It is on me. And so I really realized it was my job to create a structure for those meetings and those conversations and that accountability in all directions, especially to me, so that other people could work inside of it. But just because it wasn't going well, no one was going to come fix it for me.
No, you have to own it. You have to own it.
Wow, that is great. Well, there's been many tips from Miranda today, but that one's one of my favorites.
All right, wrapping up, I have one more question for you. We ask everybody that comes on this podcast, if you could go back, what would be one piece of advice you would give your younger self about business that you've learned along the way?
Business, I was going to say, stay away from the milkshakes. The pregnancy weight doesn't just go away. Just kidding.
That works too. Whatever.
No. Business, I think for me, finding ways to be of service to others without any kind of ego or expectation of return. And for me, that really did. I would get joy in doing that. Even when I was started getting coached, that was unexecutive. I was the person, if I noticed someone in a meeting was coughing or whatever, I would run up and get cough drops and water for them. Although nowadays we'd probably slap a mask on them. I would get so much joy out of, making sure when I was at the White House, if someone came in really late and the catering was gone, I would make sure a meal got delivered to them. But people really remember those things, and then they seek out ways to help you in the future. So doing it with a happy heart, with no expectation of reciprocity, but at the same time, just knowing the universe finds the most incredible ways to pay you back.
I love that. I really do. I don't know. I don't know if everybody I feel the same way. Like, And a friend of ours from California reached out recently. They're crushing it with their new business, growing so fast. They had all these questions. I couldn't wait to help them. I wanted to dive right in and just give them all, help as much as I could. It's amazing. So hopefully everybody feels that way.
Yeah, Miranda, it totally reminds me, and I know we're wrapping here, but like we had Pepe Charles, who's like a 25 to 30-year senior consultant at MAP. And if he hears this, he's going to be so mad that I don't have the exact date, but I'm sure it's 30 or 31. But he said something, and he wrote this great book called C'est la vie. And he said three things to us. He goes, number one, it's important in life that we understand our gifts and really develop them. Number two, we use those gifts in service of others. And number three, the world will lean our way if we do the first two. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I mean, I believe that, but to hear it said like that was so incredible. And that's pretty much what you just said.
He said it better, but I love it.
Oh,
good memory, Mike. Good memory.
This has been a great podcast, Andrew. This this one has got to get, we need people to like know that there's so much more on here than just the entrepreneurial CEO thing, that there's so much in here about speaking in public and how to maximize it.
Yeah, we'll make sure we get all the clips out with all those good nuggets from Miranda. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Miranda,
this has been awesome.
Thank you.
This has been awesome.
Thank you. This has been
really
amazing.
Appreciate
thank you
taking the time and sharing it with us. Before we wrap, where can people go to learn more about you and Mind the Mic?
Fantastic. Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so definitely find me on LinkedIn, Miranda Barrett, 2 R's, 2 T's, and mindthemic.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.